Greetings, friends. Welcome back to the Tango Banter. We are at number 47, and this is the first Tango Banter of 2023. I am Yelizaveta, here to talk all things tango with you. And before we launch into today's topic, a quick reminder about the upcoming musicality seminar with Horacio Godoy, happening Saturday the 14th. Check out the details about the seminar. He will be speaking about the very important period in tango history, the golden era, started by Juan D'Arienzo. So this is one of his favorite topics to discuss. And if you haven't had the opportunity to take any lessons with Horacio, I think you owe it to yourself to check it out. It's going to be a really great workshop. So check out the link in the show notes and let me know if you have any questions. So today's topic is the future of tango. Now, I confess, I actually recorded this particular episode already. I recorded it last week, and there were so many things, so many little things that went wrong with it, that I decided to record a completely different episode altogether. And I think it's interesting when that happens, because more and more I think about this podcast the way I think about tango. Whereas when I first started the podcast, I had a list of topics I really wanted to discuss first, things that I had thought about, written about already. So there was kind of a backlog of ideas. But as the podcast developed and I started connecting with people from all over and getting messages, and then meeting some of you guys out there on the dance floor. I met a couple of listeners at the San Diego Festivalito that happened just this last weekend. And I think that now the podcast has become more of a conversation, the way tango is, that I make a move and then you make a move and then I make a move. And this conversation is ongoing and ever evolving. So originally I had recorded this episode, and having to re-record it feels somewhat special in a way, because my story has changed a little bit. What I'm going to say is a little bit different, because the first episode I recorded really looked at the future of tango in a very academic sense, because I am an art historian by training. I have a degree, master's degree in art history and fine arts, and I tend to want to see the overarching patterns in everything. I want to see things put into categories and seeing trajectories of evolution. And I really love doing that. And that's, what attracts me to teaching musicality, I think, because ultimately I think of music the way I think about art. So there's a big connection there for me. So I had a more concrete, prescriptive type of episode where I shared what I think is important and what is possible in tango. And this episode is informed a little bit more by my experiences over the last weekend. And certain things happened since I recorded that last episode that kind of changed my perspective. So I want to, I guess, talk a little bit about that, because I think the more I share my process of thinking about tango and deciding for myself sort of what these things mean to me, I hope this triggers the same response in you, because we're all involved in tango. We're all involved in its future. We're all involved in its present. And it's healthy for us to step back, perhaps, and see ourselves in the context of tango as an important contributing piece to the big puzzle. That what we do and what we pursue in tango and how we act inside of tango communities has a ripple effect on the future of it. So I invite you to ask yourself these questions as we go along and share with me what your thoughts are on this topic. You can reach me on social media at I'm So Tango, both on Instagram as well as on Facebook, or you can email me at connect@imsotango.com. You can also join my Facebook group if you haven't joined yet, which is another opportunity for me to banter on even more. And we have really lively discussions in that group. So if you haven't joined my private Facebook group, the link is in the show notes. So as I said, I recorded the podcast and I was very happy with it. And then a series of things happened, including that I finally reached that milestone of reading a somewhat negative comment about my podcast. And I knew that was coming, as an entrepreneur, as an artist. You sort of know that the rejection is out there somewhere, even if you don't experience it right away. So that happened, and it sort of bruised my ego a little bit. Oof. And it was a reminder that, once again, it never feels good. Rejection never feels good. And we can be very wise about this and say, well, we know that not everybody likes me, right? I know not everybody likes me. Still, when you find out for sure that somebody doesn't like you, it is a little bit of that discomfort, of course. I don't think it's supposed to ever feel okay. It's just, that's the way it is. And how we act after that, after feeling that, is a real interesting reflection of where we're at emotionally, psychologically. So, within tango, we talk a lot about rejection. It's part of the conversation, it's part of the experience. And this was a reminder to me that no, it never feels good. It's always going to feel a little bit painful. And that's okay. That's okay for it to feel that way. But the next phase was sort of interesting for me, because I started getting a lot of doubts about myself, about my podcast, about whether it's the right thing to do. And it was fascinating to feel the onslaught of emotion that goes along with it. And even though there's a part of me in my head was like, well, look at this fact and look at that fact, and this happened and that all of these things that prove that you're still on the right track. Why is this one person able to push you into this kind of self-doubt? But it didn't matter. The emotions were there, and I just had this opportunity to watch myself go through this again, because it's never ending. Like you never sort of graduate from experiencing these emotions. And I think for tango dancers, when we start, even though we might not admit to it openly, I think we might think at some point it's going to get to this place where I'll just be safe from feeling this way. There is a point in time where I will be good enough that I don't experience this. And so much of it is this internal mindset game. You know, the more and more I experience it, the more and more I see the reality of that. It's very much about reflecting our own inner journeys, much more than the external circumstances. So I was experiencing all of this self-doubt, and I had to do my live chat, and that was, I think I had a lot of pent-up energy, and that showed, and it brought this like really interesting intensity to the live, and we had this really great conversation. And so again, I sort of felt this interesting contrast between the self-doubt and this sort of like, oh my God, I messed up, somebody doesn't like me. And then that energy of adrenaline then poured out in my live, and it was this interesting process of alchemy in a certain way, that I had all this emotion that had to do with this fear, fear of facing negative commentary about me, which I'm sure there's a lot of it. It's just I don't hear it directly. And, that facing of those feelings. And here I am chatting with people, and we're having this really deep discussion, and people are being very, very vulnerable and sharing their thoughts. And then on top of that, right before the live, I got a call from a friend that I hadn't talked to in years, and we spoke, and he's a wonderful dancer, one of very wonderful influences in my life, and someone who's, I say he's partially to blame, partially credited with me being a professional in tango. So I spoke to him for about an hour, and it was one of those really cosmic conversations that gave me another dimension, another perspective on my life. And so then it was time to go to the festival and drive to San Diego, and I went. And sometime in the next few hours, I got a message from another listener. And the message said something to the effect of, "Thank you so much for what you do. I listen to your podcast every night when I go to sleep," or something like that. And so, of course, that comment feels really nice. And I experienced that elation, that I'm good, I'm okay, people like me. And that emotion and that burst of energy then took me to the next phase, which was dancing at the festival and connecting with people there. And the contrast of these two experiences, to get them so close together, to have this full spectrum of emotional roller coasters, really gave me a nice little narrative, to a lens through which I could speak about tango, because what I just described is what tango is like. To walk through the tango lifestyle, to be a tango dancer, a social tango dancer, requires us to go through these emotional phases of our dance. And it forces us to be vulnerable. And sometimes we get hurt and we encounter unkindness and cruelty. And we get to witness some of the more sinister parts of what it means to be a person. And then we get to experience the complete opposite as well. And of course, it's natural for us to desire one over the other. It's a very human thing. It's a very animal thing to want what feels good and not want what feels bad. But fortunately or unfortunately, I think it's just a matter of time before you experience an example of something negative, right? It's built into the whole thing. It's a random sort of Russian roulette where you don't know. You don't know. You can do everything you can to prevent negative things from happening, for it to work out the way you want. But ultimately, it's a gift when it works well, and it's a fact of life when it doesn't. We're not immune. Nobody's immune from being criticized or judged or overlooked or neglected. None of us are immune. So when we think about the future of tango, considering what it requires, what tango requires. And my first episode was the first episode I recorded on this topic, was all about how tango has this dual life. At least two faces exist today. We have the tango that is the art form, like ballet, like any other art where people really feel invested in preserving the purity of it, the culture, the aesthetic. Maybe there's also people who are committed to innovating it, so they study it in a very art historical way, right? Like there is that dimension. So it's a high art that we must train for years to express it, right? That's where conversations about how tango is really difficult and how it takes so much time to get to a point where you're good at it. Those conversations belong in this aspect of tango as art. But tango is also I think of it as a sport, let's say. It's very functional. It has a function. I call it the long distance contact sport, right? We're getting together and we're practicing a physical movement for hours and hours. It's a very social experience. It's a community experience, somewhat even familial. Sometimes it feels like a family just because of the kinds of interactions that happen and the emotional depth that we experience within tango. It can be seen as familial. So this aspect of tango is very different. Questions of being good enough or knowing enough, they're not as relevant. When you're competing in a championship, your aesthetic really matters. When you're competing against other people and you're innovating the dance and you're showing off your own personal discoveries, your number of vocabulary and innovation in your choreographies matter. Those things matter because that's what's at stake. People are sort of One person proposes something in tango, and then the next one, and you have this high art. And it's always going to progress from simple to complex. Everything does. So as tango develops in its art form, it will necessarily become more complex. That's just how things work. But when we're thinking about social part of social tango, it's not as important to have the vocabulary that so and so has. It's not as important to look a certain way. The considerations are much more about adaptability and social skills. There's more demand on us emotionally in terms of understanding where we fit in the community and managing self-doubt, and in terms of that, social context, not in terms of competing against each other, but just how do we fit in? Sometimes these two worlds get confused. And when we're thinking about the future of tango, I suspect that the two worlds are going to become more and more defined. There's already more and more championships. There's a big push towards performance as a way of building your career in the tango profession. That seems to be the accepted track, that if you're a teacher, you could start teaching, but then at some point you will become more interested in showing your skills and traveling and becoming part of the tango circuit. And the demand for big events that showcase professional dancers who take tango to the nth degree is growing. It's not going to stop. And as people learn more and more how to market these events and get savvy with their business strategies, these events can be more and more popular and bring in more and more interest. But the social side of tango is also developing quite distinctly. And I think there is more and more grumbling in the social circles of tango about not wanting to be held to the same high standard as the professional dancers have to. So within the social side, people are saying such things as, I don't need to know a bunch of moves. I just want to have fun. I don't want to measure up. I don't care what I look like. I just want to be a good dancer so that I can have a good time. I want to be able to dance with as many people as possible. I had a student tell me, I just want to be a popular dancer. I want to walk in the room and I want everybody to want to dance with me. I think we all share that. Maybe some of us also want to be on stage and want to be admired for our skills and we want to show off, but I think that's a minority. The majority of people would like to feel this state where you walk into a room and you just know that people want to dance with you. It's a great feeling, and we're all sort of after that. So there's people in the social circles of tango who are beginning to resist the idea of constant improvement and working your technique, and instead focus on the social skills, the musicality of tango, looking at body mechanics. This is what I'm focusing on. I talk about it a lot. So I have witnessed many dancers and teachers over the past few years shift their focus to this more adaptability concept, dancing with integrated body mechanics that allows you to dance comfortably into mature age without any pain, focusing on being on axis, focusing on being more confident, like those kinds of skills. The two are related, of course, and at the Milonga, we actually get to see the interplay because there's always at least, these two general categories of dancers present. We have the social dancers, and then we have the more refined professional dancers. So as the future of tango unfolds, we're going to see these two categories become more distinct, I think. And there might be more tension between the two. I've heard professional dancers speak about the lack of interest in the social dancers and criticize people's lack of enthusiasm for perfecting their technique. So some professional dancers will see the social dancers as being a little bit lazy, let's just say, and that somehow they're not true tangueros, and vice versa. On the social side, sometimes social dancers view professional dancers as being too self-centered and maybe too committed to looking good, and maybe shallow and not really connecting with the full spirit of what it means to be a tango dancer. So from their perspective, it feels like the professional dancers are not expressing the true heart of tango. And I think they're both right from where they're standing, right? Because tango has two different faces, two different lives. And it's okay for them to coexist, and it's okay for them to not agree. But I think it's important to understand for all of us where we are in relation to these two categories and discern what is our work in the community, what is it that we're responsible for ourselves, and not take on requirements that might not be relevant to you. So a simple example would be that if you're geared towards being more of a social dancer, you really just care about having a good time at the Milonga and being a good, Milonga goer, then you might not find it necessary to study with professional tango teachers who do choreography and train you to perform. So you can let go of that. And that might take off some of that pressure. Because I know I've met so many dancers who feel like they have so much work to do before they're good enough for something. It's one of the most common comments I hear. And they'll say things like, oh, I've been dancing for 10 years, but I'm not ready for whatever is that they're wanting next. So I think as the future unfolds, all of us can be more mindful of our own role and be at peace with it, right? If you're a stage dancer and you feel like you're not getting enough from your teachers or your community, instead of blaming the community and the teachers, realize that they might not be your style, right? They might not match what your ambitions are. So look to someone else, because not all tango teachers and tango dancers have the same values. And I think sometimes we forget that, and we judge each other according to this theoretical common ground. We think that we agree on what tango really is and what it means, but it's actually quite varied what people mean by that when they say, oh, tango is this thing. This is what tango is. And then the other aspect of the future of tango, and this is where perhaps I'm going to share my own personal divination, my idea of what really matters. This is highly subjective and personal, but it does come from many years of observing. As an art historian, as a writer, I just tend to think in those ways. And so I've been really paying attention to this question for a long time. I've seen tango change in the years that I've been dancing it. There's some very visible changes. One of them, the change that I really promote and inspire and encourage others to participate in, is women leading more. That is a very obvious change that's been going on, and I think it will continue, and I hope it does so quickly. I feel that probably every single woman who dances tango right now, unless she doesn't want to lead because she doesn't enjoy it, everybody else can start leading, honestly. It's just a shift in perspective. And so if I were to take some liberty here and speak directly to women who are in that place where you want to lead, you have been thinking about it, you are aware that you actually hear the music a little differently from what the leader usually conveys. You have your own thoughts about what it should feel like. You have a little bit of that independence in you already. If you feel that, then it's time for you to start leading. And provided that this happens, which I hope and pray it does, the future of tango looks very interesting, because we really do have this opportunity to, in a very short time, change the dynamic of what a milonga looks like. Something that we've been complaining about for years, ever since I started tango back in 2009. Back then, people were complaining about this, and they're still complaining about this. The overwhelming discrepancy in the roles and gender. Just recently there was a post of registration numbers for a tango event, and it was like 5 women to 1 man kind of thing. And that's a complaint universally everywhere, even in Buenos Aires. I think it happens. I have felt this myself, that when I would go to milongas and nobody would dance with me. So the problem of women not getting the dances that they want, which means that they're not fulfilling their dreams, their desires, that they're coming out empty-handed. And so they might feel that they need to do all this work and take all these privates and study and go to this place and that place, and it might not help, and it's so frustrating. So leading as a woman, gets so many birds with one stone, really. Every event that I have attended that has just a handful of dual role dancers, who are usually women, it's amazing how it transforms the energy, because so many more women are dancing. So many more people are happy and satisfied. And that's the energy, that communal energy that social tango has. That stage tango is different, because stage, is very much about one couple outshining everyone else, but here The goal is to create that buena onda, that energy that we so love, that's very special, the energy that I missed during COVID. I talked about that when I wasn't dancing, I realized it wasn't the dance, it was the milonga, right? And I really feel strongly that we can very quickly change this dynamic so that everybody's dancing. And down the line, of course, I hope men get on board with learning the opposite role more, and we see more men following, which I'm starting to see this little by little, like this festival during the weekend. I saw a couple of men following, and that was awesome. That was awesome to see. And I think that exploration of the opposite role actually can help tango evolve as an art. When people think about evolving tango and innovating inside of it and maybe creating new movement patterns, exploring new ideas the way Chicho and Fabian Salas and Gustavo Naveira did back in the 90s, when they sort of tapped into what became known as Tango Nuevo. I believe that a lot of that sort of discovery can be made when we go from one person knowing one role, the other person knowing the opposite role, to both people knowing both roles. And whenever I've experienced that, which is why I love dancing with dancers who know both roles, it's quite magical. It's a different level. It's a completely novel experience, because it's almost like you're leading and following at the same time. And it's really juicy. And I had a brilliant conversation with a woman at the festival. She is an older woman, and she said, I never thought I would like to dance with women. I never thought I would like it. But now I love it, and she said that right after she danced with me, and then she danced with another woman who was a very advanced, beautiful dancer, teacher. And I thought, gosh, that's amazing, because she is the demographic of the kind of dancer that has been complaining the most, that she, this age group of women have been overlooked and underdanced for years. And here she is having a great time dancing with advanced dancers, and everybody wins in a certain way, like there's real practical solution, where you go from having an unhappy customer to having a happy customer. And to me, that was again, it added to my excitement about re-recording this episode, because of these new experiences that I was having. So to wrap it up, we are heading for a future of tango expansion, of tango growth. And there are many ways that we can experience it. We can choose our path. We can decide for ourselves. And if I were to think of the one goal for all of us, that we can fully endorse and we can help each other to achieve. And it is a goal of self-trust. Self-trust. Learning to trust our own desires, our own ambitions, who we want to be in tango, and conveying that, conveying who we are to the world, thinking of ourselves as artists who have something to say. We are all dancers, we're all creative beings. We enter tango fully formed in our creative potential. And tango is this tool for us to express ourselves. The way tango has been going is we've been relying on other people to tell us what it means to dance, how we need to dance, what is pure tango, what is real tango, what is not. And that worked for a while. It stopped working for me, as I've shared. And it just so happens that I have the kind of personality, and I've done this multiple times in my life, where I just said, no, I'm not going to do it your way. I'm just going to make up my own way. If I'm going to do it at all, I'm going to do it my way. And so I quit tango and I came back into tango, not really realizing I was coming back. I just decided to experiment, and I was able to develop that self-trust and figure out for myself what tango is supposed to be for me and find my place in it. And through that work, I developed both as a dancer, I developed as a person, I developed as a teacher. Along the way, the more I trusted myself and what was interesting to me and what I wanted, the more that guided me in the direction that was satisfying for me. And I think all of us can commit to that more and more. You know, there was a teacher, one of my teachers in contact improvisation in Portland, Oregon. She taught me this really beautiful lesson. She said, in contact improv, the number one rule is that you only focus on yourself. You don't focus on your partner. You think about your own body. You take your needs first. You consider your own feeling first. The other person will do the same. And I started dancing with her, and if you've ever done contact improv, it's a very interesting experience. It's sort of a free form movement connected with another person, and sometimes you're on the floor kind of rolling over each other, and other times you're standing, maybe you're doing some sort of lifts and things like that. And so I'm moving with my teacher, and she is very petite. She looks pretty frail. She's very small, very light. And I was moving with her, and it was this amazing experience for a few minutes. It was the kind of experience where you wonder, how is this really happening? I'm sure some of you have experienced this in tango too, where somewhat you're just detached a little bit from your body and you're like, how am I moving so perfectly with this person feeling? And there was a moment where suddenly I thought, oh my God, she's so small. I'm gonna crush her. And the moment I had that thought, our flow was broken and it sort of fell apart. It was such a revealing moment that still stands as a huge milestone in my life, where I experienced this kind of clear expression of this principle. And I think it's very true in tango as well, that yes, we are dancing with a partner, but if we learn to first consider ourselves within that partnership, to trust ourselves, trust our own movement, trust our own learning journey, and the other person does the same, we're going to get where we want to go, where we want to get to much faster. Because the momentum that develops from that kind of energy is actually quite advanced. You know, it just takes care of itself, just the way tango is, by its mechanism, right? Like the whole beauty of tango is you don't know what the next step is. That's the sweet spot. You dance in such a way when you don't know what the next step is and you're just present, and somehow it works magically. That's how tango is. That's how life is. And that's how tango is going to continue to evolve. We're all after a very similar experience, but the way we're going to get there can become a lot more individual, and it doesn't have to follow a particular set of steps. So I want to hear what your tango ambitions are, where you want to take your tango in 2023. As we continue this year, I hope to share whatever helpful insights I might dig up for you, because as I realized this last weekend, I really am selfish in a lot of ways. I want there to be more good dancers in social tango. I want there to be more milongas to go to. I want to be able to enjoy more people and travel and connect. So it is in my best interest to give you all of my best tools to support you in your journey. So please do share on social media, in my Facebook group, and we will banter next week.